Hello, folks. I'm here. There's no Abigail today. I'm in a new spot. I found a little chiseled out a little corner here in my basement where I can set up and hopefully stay set up until the family steal it back again. But for now, I have a spot. It's nice and cool because it's very hot outside. And this backdrop of books does not make me look very educated because they're all children's books. There's a farming book over there with eggs. I didn't put these here. My wife put them here. They're all children's books, pictures of my kids. But anyway, makes me look smart, doesn't it? I wanted to do a little preamble before we jump into this podcast with my good friend Todd Atkinson. If you don't know Todd and you go off and Google Todd, you're going to probably find some colorful articles on him. And I'll leave it up to you to weigh those articles up with the man himself and his own, I'm not sure if defense would be the word, but just judge a man by his character. Don't judge it by what Google says. And he's been slandered pretty heavy. And if you stick with us through the podcast towards the end, probably about an hour in or so, we start to unpack this very tough situation. Todd did mention to me that if anyone that knew him that watches this that is interested in connecting with him again, to reach out to me and I will connect the two of you, and he would dearly, dearly love to connect with you. So anyway, just wanted to say that before we dive into this, and I'm very grateful that Todd took the time. It's a long conversation, a couple of hours. Without further ado, let's jump in to this conversation with Todd Atkinson. Todd Atkinson, it's a pleasure to be able to sit with you, and I'm really grateful that you were able to make the time for me. There's a long history that we have from a long time ago. I think the last time I saw you was in Deep Cove, probably 10 years ago.
Maybe about 6 or 7. Yeah, we were out on your boat.
Yeah.
And even my youngest son was, I told him we were singing, and he remembered, because I think there was
he fell off the back.
he might have. That would cause someone to remember it. But also, wasn't there, like, not seahorses? There was some kind of sea creature that there was millions of.
Oh, there was probably sea lions down there.
Yeah,
lots of sea lions.
No, some small aquatic creature, and they were everywhere.
Oh yeah, the seals.
Oh, maybe. No, I meant small.
Oh, like, little guys.
Yeah, and I just remember them.
There would have been the jellyfish. Yeah. I thought it would be fun to start with a story, Todd, from back in the day. So, for those of you who don't know, like, Todd and I met in Kamloops. Todd, we were both kind of part of this church movement of God, whatever you would like to frame it as, and you got invited to run a school in Prince George.
I think I was there just for, like, you mean like a week?
Yeah. So you took
to teach for a week.
It was you and me and about 5 or 6 other people, as many we could cram into your little Astro van. And I was the driver.
I totally forgot about this.
So we drove up there, and you sat very solemnly beside me, and there was lots of conversation. And every so often you'd say, "Joby, you're not Nigel Mansell."
Oh no, I did not say that.
Yeah. And,
of course I said that.
For those of you who don't know, Nigel Mansell's a British Formula One champion. And and so then we went up to Prince George and we ran this school. I don't know if you remember. Do you remember the sauna that we had with them?
Yeah, I do now. And they were whipping each other with some kind of vegetables afterwards.
Yeah, afterwards we were whipping ourselves and then going back in. And I remember that sauna was like the hell, like it was the hottest thing I have ever felt. It felt like there was fire just burning the side of my face when they would pour water over those rocks.
Because this family were from, was it Denmark or somewhere in Scandinavia?
Like Sweden or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
So then we finished that whole thing for a week, and then we drove back, and I was the driver. And we were driving through Revelstoke, and I was watching the fuel gauge go down and down and down and down. And we're in the middle of nowhere, so there's not many gas stations. And I said, "Todd, I don't know if we're going to make it to the next gas station." And you said, something along the lines of, Joby, you're the driver. It's up to you to figure it out. Like you were teaching leadership this whole time, I think, subconsciously.
Oh, it sounds
And
like I
so
was
I,
just an
so
annoyance.
I, it was right on the E. And in that part of the world, the gas stations closed down after a certain time. So I remember pulling over in this parking, and I was kind of like, you just completely left it up to me to make the decision. So I said, what do you think if I pee in the tank? Will God turn it into gasoline?
Oh, we are not going on air with these stories, are we?
Oh yeah. And you said, Joby, if that's what God's telling you to do and you believe it's going to turn into gasoline, then that's what you should do.
Oh
So
no.
so I remember pulling over and I walked around outside and I just felt this like weight of like responsibility, and I'm like, it was decision time for me. And I was fully ready to do it because back then we were just
Try
hardcore,
anything. Yeah.
and I was ready to do it. It would have wrecked your van. And then I decided, no, I'm going to try and make it to the next gas station, and we did.
Well, that is very embarrassing to hear those stories. I wasn't sure. This is starting to sound more like an expose than a than a podcast. All my foibles. Well,
Oh no, it wasn't. It was an adventure.
well, thank you. I had been in similar spots, younger in life myself, and wanted to see how you would do. And anyways, you did great.
Oh man. So I don't know where this conversation is going to go. I just thought it would be great to connect with you, and this podcast is fairly fledgling with me and my sister normally. And as we've been kind of like, me and my sister Abigail, who lives in Halifax, had just all kinds of conversations about all kinds of things, spirituality to just parenting. And I had always said to her, like, hey, we should record these conversations because I think people would find them interesting. And it was like for a year or two, we were like, no, imposter syndrome crept in and we just didn't do it. And then one day, probably about a month and a half ago or 2 months ago, I just said, we're doing it and I'll see you on air tomorrow. And so we started it, and it's interesting how it's kind of, I don't know what happened, but I've just started to connect with people because the podcast started with me telling a bit of my story, and Abigail was just kind of interviewing me because I've had a very colorful life. And it's interesting because it's like, if you don't tell these stories, if you don't write a book or tell these stories, they kind of sometimes die with you.
Yes,
like sometimes I'll be telling a story about my childhood to my children, and they're like, you never told me that, Dad. And in my head, I totally thought I had, but I just never did. So then we kind of got to like church stuff, which was a big part of my life.
Yeah.
And I started reaching out to people from my past, and it's kind of interesting because I don't know if healing is the word, but it feels really good to just connect and fill in the blanks and see where people have gone on their story, on their journey, because so much water has passed under the bridge. So maybe it would be good to start at Kamloops because that's kind of where our paths parted.
Sure.
And I'm not interested in blaming anybody or any of that. I'm interested in just teasing things apart.
Sure.
And not even finding the answers, but just talking about it, because I do feel that there's people that are, that journey left a lot of open tabs in a lot of people's lives.
Yes, that's a good way to say that.
If this conversation can be a help in some ways to help people understand, but what was Kamloops for you? Like what drew you there? And yeah.
Okay. So I had been at the theological college before that, and so I knew Kamloops only a little bit because I was meeting up with Kamloops people to preach at conferences.
Right.
And I'd preached it probably at Kamloops, but I had spent a night in prayer and felt like the Lord asked me to resign my presidency of the college. And it was a big decision.
And where was that
um,
college?
is in a little town in Saskatchewan called Eston. Yeah,
Right. And you were
and
the dean there or something, yeah?
I was the president. Yeah,
Wow.
and I mean that's a story in itself. Um, but afterwards, I asked, you know, what should I do next? And I felt the Lord, you know, say 1 year from now you're going to go to Scotland. Again, I'm condensing a story. So I said, what do you want me to do with the year? And I felt to go to that we were supposed to go to Kamloops and be just a kind of a support figure for 1 year to a young church plant. Because when I met up with these people, um, I mean, they weren't all from Kamloops, but there was kind of a movement of young people, many of whom moved to Kamloops. But I would meet up with them all over the place. And, you know, I was speaking through the Lower Mainland in Kelowna, and I found I really loved this group of young people and was really drawn to them. And for some reason, they kind of adopted me. I remember sitting at one of these conferences, I was sitting on the ground. It was a teaching time somewhere. What was it? Was it Phil who was sitting beside me? And he looked like a skater guy.
Yeah, that's Phil.
You know, there was a distinct look in that day.
Yeah, that'd be Phil.
And I was there. I'd come out of Oxford University and looked kind of like a young Winston Churchill. I mean, I was literally dressed in morning trousers,
Waistcoat,
shirt and
Yep.
cufflinks. And he said to me, in a time of prayer, he leaned over and said, Todd, my generation, we like you. And I was kind of taken back, and because I was so different. And I asked him why, and he said, because you're really good at just being you, and that's something we value. So I kind of felt like they kind of took me into their hearts, and it drew me. You know why they took me in, but they did. And so the thought of going for 1 year, not being their leader, just being their support figure, a support figure in the community. So I did. I'd go for a walk twice a day, morning and evening, and I'd pray for everybody in that church by name. I'd pray for their marriage. I pray for their kids. I pray for their finances. I pray for their health. And twice a day I'd cover them all in prayer. So anyways, that's what drew me to Kamloops for that year.
And the kind of I guess the guy that had all the charisma that was probably drawing.
Yeah.
I mean, you could call it God, but a lot of charisma in Nolan. So where did you meet Nolan in that? Did you meet him at one of these conferences? And
Yeah. So I
connection?
think there was something run in Eston at the college that was called Street Invaders, where young people came from across Canada. And so he came with a band of people from BC, and I think was one of the team leaders. And that's the first time I met him. And then we met up at some other event. I think it was Avalanche or something. And so we began to meet up at these various events. Kind of usually both of us speaking there. And yes, and Nolan was the pastor of the church at that time. So I phoned him up and said, I feel like I'm meant to, I'm offering a year to come and be part of the church plant, if that's okay with you. And he received that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I arrived in Kamloops not long before you.
I think only very shortly before.
And it was an insane house. I mean, I remember pulling in. So my trajectory was left England, went to all over into America, then went to Toronto, was part of the Toronto airport craziness, for better or for worse. Got kicked out of that church because I got married and divorced. That was not good. And then came to Vancouver Island. Actually, the first time I met you, you never met me, but the first time I saw you, was in Campbell River, which is only now, because I've moved to Vancouver Island. It's 20 minutes up the road from me.
Yeah, I remember.
So I remember camping in a one-man tent, and it was you, Wes and Stacy, Nolan, and I had never seen anything like it. And I remember you preaching and how impactful it was, because you were different. You had this, I don't know, it's like really solemn, like not that you couldn't have fun, but you were very solemn, like
Yeah.
like a solid. It was very different. It's hard to put into
Yes.
words, but if you've
Yeah.
seen Todd speak, there's no one else quite like Todd. You
Yeah.
got your own thing, and
And I'd walked a very different journey than most of the people that had come to that event. Meaning we converged from different angles.
right,
Um,
more traditional, you would say that you come from.
no, I would say I had a journey that had a lot of suffering in it. And so in some ways, I wasn't sure where I fit because in my Pentecostal charismatic connections, I stood out as kind of being weird for that. I was drawn to the cross very deeply. It's the only way I could make sense of pain.
Can you explain
And
that?
yeah, well,
Because I
here's
remember
God.
you talking about this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, you can, it's so many angles, but we talked a lot in those days about passion, being passionate. But my entrance into passion was from the passion. The last week of Jesus' life, his particular suffering is called the Passion of Christ. That's a really different face to passion. I don't know how we would have described passion as we use the word in revival circles, exuberance or excitement, or I don't, not demeaning. I'm trying to think of what synonyms we might have used, but
Mm,
my entrance into passion was through pain, because Christ on the cross was the image is of, passion means what you're willing to endure for someone you love, and has less to do with excitement or exuberance or. So anyways, we did meet, and then I can remember the first time I spoke at Avalanche. I was just this cross guy, so I spoke on the cross, and they did this. The youth belt moved to bring this huge cross. Someone ran to some place in the building and brought it in, and 1,000 kids ran to the. I mean, I didn't orchestrate any of this,
no.
but it was one of those instances where, again, the converge. I came from a very different angle, and also, but it seemed to register there.
Yeah. Yeah. It shone brightly. When you say suffering, obviously Christ suffered on the cross. But you said you came from a place of pain. Was it understanding the pain of that, or was there actual pain in your life?
All kinds of pain in my life. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I just the journey I'd been on just felt heartbreaking, and I had to try to figure out. In the Pentecostal world I was in, there really was no theology of suffering. Meaning, I had to figure out, like, is God still for me, or how do my faith and this pain? How in the world did these go together?
What was the source of pain? The main source, like, I mean, without getting right into the weeds, but
Boy, I think
just a tough childhood, parents.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A life of it in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And then part of the pain is then all of a sudden you come to know to Christ, and I think I really experienced the power of the Holy Spirit, and so you kind of think that high is going to be permanent, and so even when it feels like it drops off, there's some pain in what did I do wrong, or where did that go, or
Mm.
how do I get that back, or because I think when I grew up, like, silence was a negative thing. If someone was silent, it's because they're giving you the silent treatment. Silence was emotional withdrawal or punishment. So if all of a sudden I go from these times where it felt like God's saying a lot to now it's very quiet, it felt like I'm being punished,
Mm.
or I've done something really wrong, or you're angry with me, or severely disappointed in me, and I didn't realize that it took me. I mean, it's taken me. I'm 58. Majority of my life to realize. Oh, I understand quiet or stillness or silence through kind of a negative lens. And what happens if I took the lens away? What happens if it doesn't mean any of those things? And what happens if I let God speak for himself, actually, for once, and tell
How about
me,
that? That's novel.
yeah, stop putting words in his mouth, and
Yeah.
should let him speak like he had his own thoughts.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
so long journey, but rewarding. And all I can say is this is my journey. All you gotta do is own your own journey, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's been mine, and that painful trajectory has only increased and intensified. But for another time, I'm sure, in the podcast.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, anything goes wherever
Yeah.
the conversation leads, right?
Okay. Well, you lead. I've never been on a podcast.
It's interesting when you talk about the voice of God being loud and then being silent. I remember my father, who's not with us anymore, who was a pastor. And he wrestled so much with this, especially because he came to Toronto Airport Vineyard where there was craziness going on. I mean, it was like the stale Christianity suddenly had spice on it.
Yeah.
Suddenly some salt and pepper was put into the Christian walk in. But my dad was watching all of it, but was just so torn up inside that he couldn't feel it.
Right.
And he was longing for this, like, how come that person's jumping up and down or screaming or shouting or laughing or doing it and nothing's happening to me?
Yeah.
And it was a real struggle for him for years and years and years. I mean, I wasn't very close to my dad, but I remember seeing that struggle, just bewilderment and kind of like, why are you not talking to me, God?
Yeah.
And I think probably looking back, it was because he was expecting God to talk to him in a certain way and say, well, that over there is how God talks. Yeah. And not realizing that he talks to some people in nature. He talks to some, it's all different for everybody. So yeah, they kind of brought that up when you mentioned that. So Kamloops, to me, is not something we can breeze past because it was
Sure.
seismic in my. There was many seismic moments in my walk in and out of Christianity and church.
Yeah.
I got kicked out. I got embraced. I got kicked out. I got embraced. There's a lot of that. Kamloops was a big one for me. I and I just think it would be interesting to analyze it with you and get your perspective on it. So I moved into this house. I was like, I drove up from Vancouver Island because Jamie McMecken, who's now passed, invited me from that camp in Campbell River. He just came and sat down beside me and said, hey man, I think you should come visit me in Kamloops. And I mean, Jamie's not very outward, he's very kind of insular and it just stuck with me. So I just packed my bags, drove to Kamloops, pulled up outside this house that was a townhouse. So it was a shared house with someone else beside in the house. And I walked up the stairs and it was like, Nolan was there. Heather just gave me this stare that only Heather can do, with her different colored eyes. She's like, I'm like, oh my goodness. And there was like 2 people living in the basement, Nolan and Heather in the basement. Jamie was still living there. They stuck me somewhere. And then you showed up with your wife and daughter, Cecilia.
I think there may have been as many as 13 people in that house. It's
borderline illegal.
I never thought of it.
How was it for Sherry and for, I mean, you lived in a bedroom where there was no sleeping, like Nolan would be loud and in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
I mean, how was that?
It was a living contradiction. My wife and I just seemed to be, I said that was her year of resurrection and mine of crucifixion because I was afraid she's going to hate this. I arrived a couple of days before she did, and I'm in big trouble. What did we do? Because it's one thing to meet people at a conference, I learned, and share a few days and some sweet experiences. It's another thing to live in a community, to live in the same house with 13 people. I hadn't thought that through. But my wife took to it more than I did. The very first night that she was there was a kind of a women's gathering or conference or something. Some of the women speakers came from Kelowna, and my wife went to it and got very, very impacted. And Sherry was really making her way on her gradual way out of clinical depression. And so there's been a few steps in positive direction before that, but she came home kind of a different woman. She was, as you remember those days, kind of quivering, shaking. I was like, what happened to my wife? And she made some really deep connections with a small group of women. And so she seemed to really love it. I found it claustrophobic because I'm a real introvert and I need my alone time. And there was no alone time in that house. So I think I felt torn because there's some good stuff. I mean, I want to be at the prayer meetings and I want to have I don't want to miss out on something, but I found it suffocating, not just because of my own personality. And I think so then eventually when we moved out and we moved into with a family from the church. There was only two families there. It was a lot quieter, and then eventually we moved in with Bobby and
Brian.
Bobby Brown and family, Bobby and Brian Brown, which was just blissful. I think each time just a little bit more quiet, a little bit more space, and yeah, and I think I was where I think if I remember the language I used to use, I'm at a spot where community and my individuality and community are bucking up against each other. I want to be part of a community without losing who I am. And my family, I don't want to lose my family.
No.
And which is all important to me. So those three things, my own persona, individuality, family, and community, were in a hothouse together. I mean, they were fighting and or kind of for territory. So I think each of those steps, then I was, it was a little bit better for me personally to get a little bit more breathing space, a little bit, I think, better for my family, just quiet, more time with my daughter. But then you get to relate to the community. Let's just say I'm better in community when I've had my family time and I've had my alone time.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there's a little more balance.
Right. Yeah. I mean, my perception back then, when I remember, because I remember it felt to me like you were a person that loved your solitude, but felt compelled to be pushed onto the stage, as it were.
I'm not a natural public figure.
No, but you're a natural speaker and leader. And I think when I look back and I remember just the kind of the feelings that I had back then, it felt to me like you were struggling with because you often would say, I'm just supporting Nolan. I'm Aaron. I'm holding his arms up.
Yeah.
This biblical metaphor. But it felt like I don't know if you felt it, but people wanted you to be more, to give more, to present more than you were giving. Because I think that there was a lot of immaturity around that movement, and you presented as a much more, you had it together a little more, a little, and I think people were desperate for a little more consistency or something. So I don't know if you felt that kind of like that.
Probably at that stage of
feeling pulled into the vortex, but not wanting to get pulled in.
I think probably at that stage of life, I was probably a little maybe oblivious to some people's signs, meaning I could feel like they wanted me personally, hang out, talk, pray. But I probably was oblivious if they were wanting me to play a larger role, because I'd really never been, like, I'd been an itinerant speaker, mission, but I'd never really been in charge of anything, or hadn't been a leader in the sense of a leader of an organization or a leader of a community. I'd just never been that. I'd been kind of a sole guy out there speaking. And so I probably, if that is what they wanted from me, I would have missed that. I would have missed those cues. And I think I was kind of just perplexed that these people wanted me in any way. They wanted me kind of more personally. And I think I was kind of shocked that these people who I admired, I really loved that community of people. And I think I wanted to, when I watched them at the powwow station, there was a kind of freedom to those people. They were kind of like modern day hippies.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like Woodstock.
It was a little like that. But I remember when I would see some of them, there was I think I would like to be like them. I don't know. They seem to have something special. So the fact they wanted me in their lives, wanted to talk, having me over for dinner, I think I was probably pleasantly surprised by just that.
I mean, I think from what I observed through my journey through life, the best leaders are the leaders that don't actually want to be a leader.
Yeah, and I was only going to be there a year.
Yeah, so you always had that out.
Yeah, and I was careful to what I commit to. And a lot's my self-perception. I guess it was just the way I perceived myself as, I offer some support from the sidelines. And that was really meaningful to me, but I didn't, I guess, perceive myself as anything more than that.
So looking back on that how many years? Oh, you were there for a year. I was there for a lot longer. Can you summarize Kamloops? Because
is the word
Those people who are listening
mixture.
who have no idea what we're talking about, because there's probably going to be quite a few of those. There was definitely something that was drawing people from all over Canada, the same that Toronto was. It was like this magnetic force that was, and I think it was the murmurs, right? Were getting out. I mean, can you imagine if social media was a thing back then? It would have been way bigger.
Yeah.
Because it was just word of mouth.
Yeah.
And people would come and just live on nothing and share food. And I mean, it was just, everyone was, on the poverty line. So there was, I mean, yeah. So I don't want to take your time. Like what's your...
Well, there's a lot of mixture. But I think as I read about New Testament community, I think I see the same thing. I see the same thing in the disciples. At one minute they get it, and the next minute they don't. And there was just something happening in Canada at that time that was, I don't know if this vocabulary still works, or a movement of God, meaning there is stuff happening that I had never seen, never to experience, that was directing people up and into a living faith with God, a living connection. But at the same time, if you turn a movement like that over to, I mean, we're all very young, and raw. So amongst a lot of highs, there's a lot of pain. I try to think, and when you're ministering like that, God is on you like a fire. Like, I mean, sometimes I couldn't believe what is happening. I feel like I'm a human pillar of fire. People look at you like you can do no wrong. So there is an idolization of leaders.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd love to say that didn't affect me, but it did. Especially, it didn't at first, but after you've been under it for years, that kind of adulation, it starts to affect you, and you start to, when you're receiving it, you're less careful. You start to believe your own press too much. And because I'd come from a very broken place before, and I remember thinking it'll never get to me. Like I had been squashed too deeply to ever get too full of myself. Well, that didn't happen. Or the opposite happened. I think I grew in at some stage into self-importance.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I mean, it's the human condition, right? There's a couple things that we're just so prone to. Is like the draw of money. It's like this allure that, I always say, if someone was to come up to you and say, I'll give you $5 million, but here's the catch, you're going to be unhappy. Most of us would say, give me the 5 mil, I'll try and figure it out. Right. I don't think that'll happen to me. And the same thing with fame. Give me fame. I don't think it will, because that's what the adulation. Because I remember, and then there would be a conference, and there would be this, like, the leadership would all come, and they were treated like rock stars and acted like rock stars. So, all of a sudden, I always found that very difficult. I would be close to someone, say like a Nolan character. We would be going to Kelly O'Brien's and talking about whatever, and then a conference would happen, and all of a sudden I don't exist, because now I'm with the rock star group, and I always really struggled with that. I think my own personal journey is, even when I was running the discipleship school there, I was never really truly happy until I was on the reservations.
Right.
And that wasn't like something that I just never, looking back at the whole canvas of my experience, I never was really happy inside the church. Even in the Toronto Airport Vineyard, I would take groups, while the pastor was preaching, I would take groups down to feed the homeless. Not because I thought that was the higher call. I just didn't like the stodgy business of church. And then I remember students would ask me, like, we're out here in the middle of nowhere in a broken down van at -40, and you're laughing. What's going on? I'm like, I didn't know how to, I didn't understand what was going on. But to me, I was like, this is living. Like, this is living. Like, on the reserves, we would just, like, hang out all day with these First Nations people, just walk around, and it didn't feel like we were accomplishing anything. But for me, I felt, and I've looked back on I've missed that in my life. Like what I really truly miss,
Yeah.
that's when I felt the most fulfilled ever. So
Right.
yeah, going back to that feeling of like people are treating you like a rock star, and for sure it's going to rub off on you.
Yes.
Part of my struggle with what happened in Kamloops is the good stories are minuscule compared to the trail of carcasses that,
Right.
and that's just the truth. I mean, I knew everybody in that church, and I know how many people came away from that movement and are just in PTSD, like never really recovered from it. So I think for me, looking at a Kamloops scenario, I have a really hard time squaring what was God
Yeah.
and what was just human talent. You get someone talented like who's a good speaker in front of people. I mean, we've seen it with, I'm not comparing, but we've seen dark leaders in history who can move an entire nation to do something good or bad, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've never been able to equal that. To make those two connect. Like, yes, it was a crazy time. It was very, very exciting in the heat of it.
Yeah.
But I wonder, there didn't seem to be a lot of long-lasting, deep. There's only a few people that I know that carried on and didn't lose their faith in a way, or lose their, and so I look back and think, to be honest with you, I have a ton of regret.
Yeah.
And to look back on your life and have regrets isn't the best thing.
Yeah.
But I feel embarrassed about a lot of the stuff that I did. The only thing that I can take away that's positive is the work that I did with out on the mission field or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wasn't preaching to anybody.
Yeah.
I was just hanging out with these guys.
And I don't know if my perceptions are right, Joby. During that year, it was a hard year for me. To be in truth, I couldn't wait to get out. But I don't regret it, meaning because it was the people that I got to hang out with and be with. I still carry them in my heart. That's why seeing you again instantly. Joby, asked me to do this. I'd never been on a podcast before, but I still have this appreciation or regard for. And then I left, and it began a whole new chapter in Scotland. And I did get the impression that things got tougher as the years went on. But I was, well, geographically separate from it. But more than that, this was before I was, I didn't keep in contact with that community very much. And I regret that. And that's why I think I connected with you and others, meaning I think I got eventually news. I began to realize that this huge fallout and hurt. And felt like if I could do anything, if I could connect with people, is it too late? Because I missed this chapter. But if I could, if there could be any healing in that, if I could stand in the gap for anything I've done, and just listen or say I'm sorry, or if I was the cause of any of the hurt, I would want to know.
You carry a lot, Todd.
Well,
I mean, you carry a lot.
I just want to do whatever I can do to be a little bit a part of people's healing and not add to pain. And that's why I'm here today, because if this gives me a way of making it a little bit of contact, there's other individuals I had some contact with, but I when you talk about the fallout, which is true, it makes me really sad. These are good people.
100%. And I have worked through my anger. I started a band, and my therapy was really writing about it.
Okay, yeah.
And I toured for years, just playing in nightclubs, and they had no idea what I was singing about. But I was singing about, and I sang it night after night after night. When you record an album, you play it hundreds of times, and that was how I kind of flushed it out. There's so many things. There's so many questions, but I mean, I think for me, it's the blurry lines between where I've always come at a crossroads with religion, church, Christianity, whatever you want to call it, is where where people do what the leadership does what the Bible tells them to do, but it colors outside the lines. I hate to say what the Bible tells, it contradicts. Like, it doesn't, your marriage isn't going to work out, so we need to kick you out of the church and excommunicate you.
Yeah.
Like the podcast that I sent you with the one I just talked to with Jenny, she was telling me, she's like, we used to have prayer meetings where we were trying to call you back, and then from the pulpit they would say, you cannot hang out with Joby anymore. And I knew this stuff was happening, and I was like, yeah, I know church. I've been around it my whole life. That's just the way it goes. I understand, and I hardened my heart to survive it. But when I came out of Kamloops, and what I saw happen to so many people, the recoil was massive. I mean, it was like, not just like, ooh, that kind of hurt. It was like, just going off the rails, I mean, like the complete opposite of everything that we had held true. It was like partying and looking at other, so what does that? I mean, it's like the church needs to take account. And I know it has taken account in history, because there's been a lot of bloodshed over it, but it doesn't seem like it ever seems to change. It's like the infallibility of humans that try to handle this big thing and then get sucked into the same old story again. It's like leadership gets corrupt. They have, and all of a sudden we need a building, we need offering, we need more money, and now we need rules. And oh no, so-and-so was caught at the pub, we're going to have to kick him out. And so it happens over again and over again and over again. And so for me, I've lost I cannot walk into a church unless it's a wedding or a funeral, because it just turns my stomach, because I see the hypocrisy of it. And you don't need to feel bad for me for that. It's just, that's just, and there's thousands of people that feel that same way. Yeah. And so it's hard to equal it, right? To say, was that all worth it? Did that do a net good or a net negative? And in my eyes, the dial goes more towards the negative, even though, I mean, it's like having an affair on your wife. Yeah. It's really fun until it's not fun anymore. Yeah. Until you get caught, then it's not fun anymore, and it's like, woof. And so it was really fun until it wasn't, and when it wasn't, it was like, I mean, yeah.
Let's just say I have a deeper appreciation. I mean, I would have heard those things years ago and felt like, yeah, what are people doing? But I am now kicked out of the church, so I'm that guy now, and that has been part of the pain in recent years, which is the colossal gap between Christ and his church. That the mixed messaging is that Christ is one way to me, and his church has been the opposite way. And so I'm the bad boy now, the bad sheep.
Welcome to the club, Todd.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I did something like that. But if nothing else, I guess I needed to go through this, because you don't really get it until it happens to you. Now it's happened to me. I am on the margins now.
Right.
And yeah. And so, my reading of scripture is, I mean, the things that I believed then, I've had to go, do I really believe those things? Even about, well, I don't know how else to say it, except that there's a scripture in Galatians 6 that I used to teach people. This is the way we're going to deal with things. It says, if you believe that a brother has sinned, how should you treat him? You that are spiritual or full of the Spirit. Like if you think that's you should restore him in a spirit of gentleness, and don't get and don't think for a minute you're beyond the same thing. So restore him, be restorative, be gentle, be humble. How you do it, because we're all made of the same stuff. And so, meaning even if he hasn't sinned, if you think he has, if you think he's totally blown it, has he really blown it? But even if you thought he has, so when I used to hear about cases, I used to think, I don't really know. I'm not close enough to know the facts. But even if it's true, barely is anything 100% true. But even if it was, I need to be gentle. I need to seek their restoration. And the Greek word restore there is It was used in a couple ways. It was used of fishermen mending their nets, meaning you get a hole in the net, don't throw the net away.
Mm.
Fix it, restore it, bring it back into use. Don't throw it away. It was also used as a medical term. If you broke a bone, then cut the arm off, kick the person out of church, like help heal it, and as a doctor, be gentle the way you go about this, because there's a lot of pain there, and so I just feel like the way the church is handling situations could not be more different than the way her Lord handled them.
I mean, do you think that, like, I question a lot about the Bible. I feel, and I'm sure you do not like this statement, but I feel like the Bible in a way has become a golden calf. And I didn't expect you to nod there because I know how you,
Oh no.
but I feel that it made people do what in their heart they knew wasn't right to do. And it took the living God, if he is alive, and then he, I mean, when he came to earth, when Jesus came to earth, if you believe the Bible, he walked straight into a church and just straight out the back door again. He's like, nah, I'm going to go hang out with cussing, really uncouth fishermen, you know. And that's where, I mean, and that's where I think that's why I felt more at home with down and outs, because I didn't understand it then. I was just like, there was something to do with this, like, I don't know. It's like the aristocracy of it. It was like too much chocolate cake. It was like something it just didn't. I didn't like it. But I would much rather go and sit with someone, and it wasn't something that was contrived to me. It was just this natural draw to it. And I think because I just wanted real, and I have felt like coming out of Christianity, I felt way more loyalty. When I got into music, like we moved from Kamloops to Vancouver, moved into a house to start a career in music, and moved literally 3 steps away from another band that had already been established. It was a total fluke. And we're still friends to this day. And I could have told those guys a year into our friendship, hey guys, I think I'm gay, or, I've got this problem, or I just, whatever it might be. And they would just be like, okay, that's cool. And just, and I remember scenarios like run out of gasoline on the way home, call up someone. Hey, I've run out of gas. Can you bring me some gas? There would be, this is a scenario that happened. It would be like, I think God is trying to teach you something. Yeah. You should have been more responsible. And I'm standing in God's way by not coming to bring you fuel. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that's not friendship.
Yeah.
And I understand being the devil's advocate. If you're in a place of leadership and you're trying to get from point A to point B, therein lies the problem. We have a vision that we want to get to this finish line, revival. And anyone that stands in the way of that is slowing down the process. And so kicking someone out or making these blanket rules is the simplest way. I mean, if you're going to battle, you don't want anyone to say, I don't know, this is a good idea. It's like, these are our orders. We'll talk about that after battle. And it felt like in church that there's this agenda. And I remember going through some really, really hard time one time on Christmas, and it's a long story, but I was really a mess. And I remember driving downtown Vancouver, and this was way after Kamloops, and I was, not what you'd call a textbook Christian at that point. And all I wanted to do was go and sit in a Roman Catholic type of Church of England church and sit at the back. And just because I still, to this day, still believe that God exists. I can't not believe it. I've seen too many miracles.
Yeah.
He's too real not to be real for me.
Yeah.
And all I wanted to do was go, because I knew in there, no one would come talk to me. No one would try and promote me. No one would say, oh, he's got a gift. Let's get him on the worship team.
Yeah.
All I wanted, and that was just my instinct, was like I wanted to go to a church with the big stained glass windows and all the things that we used to mock in charisma Christianity.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen The Chosen. Have you ever watched any of The Chosen?
I've heard amazing things about it.
Yeah, it's good. I was loath to watch it at first because I've not been terribly fond of Christian movies. I don't remember how I was introduced to it, but after all the stuff that's would be time for another podcast has happened to me in the last 3.5 years, where I got kind of disowned. I would watch it and weep so hard. In fact, I've went through a kind of a heart-wrenching 3 years, and the 3.5 years, and the only time I really cry is when I watch The Chosen. Why is that? And I don't cry a little. It's ugly. It's a howl.
Yeah, I've seen you cry. I've heard you cry.
And I had a lot of, what is this thing doing to me? But it was when I'd been treated with such unkindness. Like, unkindness is, I need some word stronger than unkindness, but, and just to see God in Christ depicted as just kindness again made me weep so hard, because, and it made me a little crazy because my world felt duplicitous. Like, I don't know how to reconcile these two things, but it gradually reminded me that's what I bought into. I bought into Jesus, and to that, the way he would, his kindness, and noticed he just always goes for the people on the fringe, the margins, the unaccepted. And I haven't quite got my head and heart around this, but eventually realized that what I went through has served me to put me into that category. And then I've got a wonderful old 85-year-old spiritual director, Roman Catholic Jesuit, and from the States, but he says to me, Todd, the Spirit of God is always on the fringe, not at the center. He's always moving, so God has put you at the fringe. You are an exile, and that's where you were at the center of things, and now you're an exile. Yeah. And so I think that's what I originally liked about the Kamloops people. I didn't have that vocabulary, but I think they were exiles, kind of social exiles, and God was moving strong amongst exiles. Mm-hmm. But we wanted to become the center.
Yeah. It eats its own tail, right? Kind of.
We wanted to become the center, the influencers, we're going to bring revival to Canada.
Everyone dressed in green today. Revival's coming. Remember that? Oh, no, sorry. It's orange. Next week's orange.
Oh, you're so good you can laugh at it. Man. Yeah, craziness. But it has taken me back to at least, okay, I'm exiled. I'm been put out. But let's just say Christ is treating me one way, and it is not that. As I said, I am not finished. I'm pretty raw, and so I don't even have do I have the words for it yet? All I know is he's treating me one way. Mm-hmm. The church is treating me another. And they don't understand. Again, they got a Bible and like a verse for everything. But in some ways, the individual verses have to serve the main theme. There's the main thrust. And the moment we lose track of that main thing, like then everything turns hazy and we lose our way. And so if this painful part of my journey returns me to what it's all about, to the main thing, if I could look at people like Jesus does, on people that nobody else wants, the Samaritan woman is a story that I can't get out of, because the Samaritans were a despised people by God, from God's people despised them, not a pagan nation. God's people hated them. Then there's one woman amongst them. She's the despised of the despised. Yeah. Because she's been divorced and remarried 5 times. So even in her culture, they're like, that's way too much. And how Jesus goes on this trip through Samaria for one person, how he's drawn like a magnet to the despised. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm now the despised. I actually am. I've lost almost every friend in my life, and not even over the truth, over rumors. And so those stories now they're like, I'm looking at them and going, the church may not be like that, right? God help. As long as my Lord is still like that. And is he like that to me? Will I find him seeking me out when I'm despised and not wanted anymore? And he was so gentle with this woman. And if you ever get to watch that episode in The Chosen, it'll make you cry. Very, very well done.
I'm sure it will. It's, what did Jesus, true religion is take care of the widows and the orphans. The greatest of these, love your neighbor as yourself. Like these, we kind of peruse over those things, right? But it was the top of the pile.
It was, yeah.
And I remember when I got kicked out of the Toronto airport because I was decided that, yeah, marriage was, it was almost like an organized marriage. That's the way it was. It was, you know, I knew
Like
it.
an
I
arranged
knew
marriage?
sorry?
Like an
My
arranged
first
marriage?
marriage. It was
Yeah.
an arranged marriage. Yeah. I mean, it
Yeah.
was like, you know, there was lots of rhetoric, like you were the first marriage of the outpouring. You are, you know, and then so, but the whole time I had massive alarm bells. I mean, it was my own doing. I could have
Yeah.
walked away. I didn't. But there was a lot of pressure. And I remember John Arnott, who was the leader of that church, and Kim Unruh, who was the youth pastor, who came to my work site, like, and were like, absolutely, what are you doing? Don't you realize what are you walking away from? And it wasn't just, it didn't feel like it was just the marriage. It was like you're walking away from God.
Yeah.
And I just looked at them and I just said, you know, I know that when I get to heaven, if there is a heaven, I'm going to get a spanking. But I know in my heart that God loves me because I can feel it. And
Yeah.
they did not know what to do with it.
Yeah.
It was just so like, you're delusional. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I know, I don't expect you to understand it, but I feel it. He's not loving what I'm doing. I knew full well what I was doing was going to cause a lot of pain.
Yeah.
But there was nothing in me that was like, he's turned his back on me. And that's what they were trying to hook me with. And I remember when I left the feast, it was from the pulpit, staring at some of you are walking away from the move of God, you know, when I was going to move to Vancouver. And I just smiled inside. I was like, I know your God ain't my God, because it doesn't seem like the same. And I didn't say it, but I knew it in my heart. I was like, nah, there's a bigger picture going on here. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah. That's
So, yeah.
And first of all, I want to respect your experience. I think pain has made me a better listener. I do more listening than speaking. So to hear you say, I made this decision, I knew it would cause a lot of pain, but God was with me and I felt God loving me. Wow. That wasn't conjecture. That was your experience, and nobody can take it away from you. Meaning, that's the kind of God he is. It wasn't just, yeah, that's the kind of God he is, and it's the kind of person I'd like to be.
So your life, you went from Kamloops to Scotland.
Yes.
Pastored in Scotland.
I didn't pastor. I lived on an island, a wonderful island called the Isle of Skye.
Wow.
And I led mostly a prayer existence. And then in prayer, I'd feel like I had these little assignments, and it was kind of, this beautiful unfolding story for those 3 years. It's a great time for us as a family. It was a healing time.
Yeah.
We needed to heal, and the Lord knew what kind of setting we needed. I think we're there again. We might move sometime because we just need some setting to heal in. It was, just a wonderful little fishing village of 300 people. Built deep relationships there with the Highland folk, and would have liked to have spent the whole rest of my life there. The day I felt the Lord tell me we got to move, I wept really hard. I really wanted to live and die by there. But an exceptional gift at that time. Because remember, we'd left the Bible school, and I felt like I was supposed to. So then, that was a very tough chapter, misunderstood by a lot of people, and felt like I'd let a lot of people. And then a year in Kamloops was not altogether easy. And so when we arrived at Scotland, there was just space to breathe and to be, new people. They just kind of accept you at face value, and you don't have this kind of like negative record of wrongs to have to work through. And they were they were just kind and receiving, accepting. And so it was a wonderful, wonderful time. And we were there for 3 years. I still miss it to this day.
Yeah. Walking the Highlands with your walking stick and your pipe. I still got your pipe. You gave me a pipe.
Yeah.
Sinner. Teaching me to smoke. It's interesting. I'm sure people are curiously listening to when you say so easily, God told me to move. God told me to do this. God told me to do that. Like, how does God tell you those things in a booming voice, like what we, the burning bush experience, or is it just this kind of little nudges?
Yeah. Yeah, very quiet. I often think that if people could hear how quiet and still it is, they'd think you moved countries on that. Like that's so faint. But we're each of us are the product of our own story, and so just the way God dealt with me is I as a younger Christian was really upset with him. Like, why can't you speak up? Why is this so jolly difficult? And I had this experience with him where let me put it wasn't happening in words. Let me put it in words. It was kind of like he'd said to me, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, what? What are you mumbling? Speak up. And then I heard a kind of another mumble. I'm like, I was so angry. Like, you're like the God of the universe. You think you can speak audibly, like, or just something I could make sense of? Anyways, long story. The metaphor. It was a metaphor. Eventually, I kept going, what again until I was right close, and then I could hear him whisper saying, "This is where I want." I don't yell at first. This is why I whisper, because this closeness is what it brings about. Right. And so I think over a lot of years, learned to just be still and near, listen, doesn't have to be loud. And I had lots to learn, inner ways of knowing, discerning, testing what's God, what isn't God. And it seemed to pay off. Like whatever little internal ways I developed to do that seemed to help me.
And little doors open, like conversations come, things that almost like people will call serendipitous or.
Yeah, you learn to see God in the small.
Yeah.
And the revival stuff helped me in some ways it hurt me because it's like the kind of underlying message is God is only in the dramatic. Mm-hmm. And sometimes God was in the dramatic, but it's really hard to climb down from that and find him again in the small and intimate. It's like getting married and thinking every day should feel like your wedding ceremony. Like it's not going to happen. And if you hold on to that expectation, it'll ruin your marriage.
Yeah.
There's a lot of small gestures, that makes relationships meaningful. And so yeah, no, I don't hear him any better than anybody else does. And I've probably been through a period. I think I'm coming out of it, but where I think my confidence to hear him was rocked. So I think I've had some years there where he's probably not saying anything less, but my confidence in myself, my confidence that I could hear anything, I think is got, severely rocked. And it's probably in the last couple of weeks in still times where some stuff's been happening. I'm like, oh, I think I'm, healing. I'm being healed a little bit at a time. And, my confidence is starting to grow and I'm starting to dial in and maybe hear him again.
It's interesting, like when because I often try, because you're, there's a lot of Christianese, like some people, revival. What do you mean by revival? Like a lot, because it's just your life. And I've been out of it for so long that I can kind of hear it from the other perspective. So it's an interesting position that I'm in because I know exactly what you're talking about, but I also know that, and when you think about if there is a God, a creator of this universe, the all, powerful God, it's like, why is it so freaking difficult? Like, what? And I don't know. It's just a simple question, but
no, it's a good question, and I wonder who's making it difficult.
Yeah, and I wonder
somehow our job should be maybe to make it simpler and more accessible. I mean, isn't this the whole reason God came in the form of Jesus was to make it simple and accessible? And did we remove the simple and accessible from it?
I think so. We overcomplicated it, and we often think that the only time God talks, it's a massive event, like move your family over to here. It's not little. It's not. And I mean, I believe in a creator and a God for sure. I don't quite understand Jesus and the Bible. I think I still cannot separate that from just all of the spiritual abuse that I've been through.
Yeah.
But I understand what you mean, because it's like I'm in a place with my business where some, you listen to like positive, the speakers. Oh, you got to speak every morning. You got to say affirmations like, thank you for my family. Thank you for the money that I don't yet have, And it's easy to do when the money's pouring in, but when it doesn't pour in, I'm like, I don't know if I believe that. I
It's
mean, it's
true.
just, it's the same thing in the spiritual walk, right? It's
Sure it
like, it's
is.
easy to do when the tap's on,
Yeah.
but when it's not, I'm like, do I really believe that the universe is going to um, bring the business that I need so I can pay
Yeah.
my mortgage?
Yeah. I've heard that.
And I feel shaken in those things, and it's a little disconcerting and a little uneasy feeling
Yeah.
because you kind of think, are you really sure? It's kind of like cliff jumping, and it's like, are you sure you don't think there's rocks down there? Like someone told you there's no rocks. What do you think? Because when you jump, it's like you're all in, and this kind of like, um,
Yeah.
so you left the Isle of Skye, you went to Lethbridge, I believe.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, we well just felt it was time to return to Canada. Didn't really know what I was coming back to. But there was an African friend called Daniel Zapula, and I'd known him from earlier chapters of life. He's from Burkina Faso. At the time I was getting near the end of Scotland. I didn't know I was getting to the end, but he was really on my mind. I think I'm supposed to work with this guy one day. And I was even thinking, I wonder how to get him to Scotland. But then before long, I was back in Canada. So I made inquiries. Where is he? And found out he was in Lethbridge, working at the very church that I started my faith journey in.
Hmm.
So I traveled there to visit him, just to tell him, okay, I'm just going to put it out there. I've felt for years that we would work together one day, but it's getting stronger.
Hmm.
I didn't think that meant Lethbridge. I don't know what I thought it meant. It's just, but anyways, he said, well, this is your home church, your first church, and come and preach next Sunday. The people would love to hear from you. So I did. And afterwards, he and the older man, which was my very first pastor as a teenager, lovely man called Bill Calderwood, they took me out, Sherry and I, out for lunch and asked us, would we move there and come on staff? And yeah, so that's what brought us to Lethbridge.
And then you became a bishop.
Years later, I did.
So there's this gap. I'm like, what? You went from like charismatic church jumping up and down to a bishop.
Yeah. That probably seems like it was one small step for mankind, but it was a lot of steps. So I'm in Lethbridge, and that little group, the older founding pastor, the African pastor Daniel Zapula, and myself, somehow it really worked. We grew like, I don't know, that church grew a lot. And after 3 years, the older man felt happy and felt he would maybe time to retire. And so long story short, they made me the lead pastor, which I didn't come there for that. I'm not so sure I should have said yes to that. Now looking back, there's a lot more qualified people than I ever was. But long story, I'm in that seat. And the truth is, I don't know what I'm doing, because we have now a very large growing congregation, and they're looking to me in a certain way to get something. And I feel like a man that's trying to build a building and no one's given him a blueprint. And I'm a fairly strategic thinker and think, like, how am I supposed to build this? Like, I think I was asking some maybe fundamental questions. What is church meant to be like? And because when you're an itinerant, you don't ask those. You just go in, you speak. It's like someone else built the hotel. You're just going to stay for a night. Now I'm in a very different job where, like, they want me to build something, and there's no plan. There's no blueprint to follow. And so I was really feeling that. And it's a young congregation, getting younger all the time. We're drawing young families and young people. And I think I really needed some older people in my life, but we're drawing the younger people. And I think because, anyways, I really needed some help. So one day I was kind of complaining to the Lord about this, saying, this feels weird. It feels unnatural to have so many people looking to me, and I don't have anybody to look to. And I don't know what you're going to do with this, but I'll just tell it to you the way it happened. And I felt like the Lord said to me, the early church fathers will be like fathers to you. And I was so disappointed. I'm like, the early church fathers? Like, I thought I need someone real, like I could go for lunch with and ask questions. Like, you're talking dead. I said to him, you give me dead guys for dads? Like, So this is the people that would have been after the early apostles that would have been trained by them, and then kind of the next generation where they are starting to build church and navigate this very difficult time in Roman Empire, persecution, stuff. And long story short, it wasn't the answer I wanted. It's the answer I got. So I started to read them, and when I did, I actually connected very deeply and kind of emotionally. Like, it really touched me what I was reading, answered some questions for me. And what we in the charismatic circles thought of as an apostolic calling, they just had their own understanding of that. That's what the first bishops were, the successors to the apostles, people that are going to carry on the role that anyways, long story short, it really, the way they described it felt like, wow, that's really calls to me. But it didn't, that wasn't in our tradition. Like, and the way there's the way they explained lots of things really spoke to me. And these are people who were being slaughtered by the Roman Empire, were being fed to lions, there's a considerable depth there. So I said, Lord, I don't really know in this day, am I meant to be just learning this? Is this just historic interest? It's kind of calling to me. And long story short, before I knew it, I met actual historic church bishops who said, we see this kind of call on you, and could we train you for this? And so anyways, the first steps in that direction were what we called convergence. Meaning I wasn't saying goodbye to my past. The convergence maybe started with a question, which is, the evangelical church, if you could bring the very best out of it, meaning it's not everything, but if you could bring the best out of it, and the best out of the charismatic Pentecostal background, and the best out of the historic church, if you knew what that was, and you could bring them together, what would that look like? And so really it was a movement in the direction of unity.
Frankenstein.
Oh, that's maybe true. I hadn't thought that. maybe that's true.
Okay.
I can only tell you what my mindset was then, which was, I don't think any streams got it all, but maybe each one's got a couple gems. And so it was a movement in the direction of unity.
So was that the bishop? Was it Church of England, or was it?
No, it would have been breakaways from Anglican churches.
Okay.
Yeah, Anglican, but they were kind of charismatic Anglican churches, so breakaways from. Yeah, I think when I met them, that's what I thought. Like they were evangelical in the sense there was they preached from the Bible. They were still charismatic in the sense of they believed that personal encounters with God were possible, and they were historic in the sense of roots. And I think I was looking for some roots, and not roots at the expense of living water, but like not dry roots or dead roots. But so I know it's really tough to explain this.
I think that the roots are so incredibly important. Yeah. I think that the lack of structure in the charismatic churches that I was involved in was part of the demise. The fact that there wasn't a board, there wasn't answer. You trusted some young guy who had just natural born talent to be able to motivate a lot of people, and very quickly he becomes untouchable, and very quickly he's got no one to answer to, and he does whatever she or he do, whatever the whim this Sunday, and so I think that's so so incredibly important in any organization.
Yeah,
is to have some roots, some accountability, some old blood.
Yeah.
Which is going to slow you down, but so necessary.
Yeah. And if images help, they don't help everybody, but I had the image in my mind. I want both. I want branches that extend far into culture, far outside of the church, and they're full of life, but roots that go deep. And that was the image. I wanted both. I felt like I needed some roots. So that's how that journey sent me in that direction. Eventually, I was made an Anglican bishop.
You strapped on the dog collar. Yeah.
Yeah,
What
and
is
at
that all
first
about? What is the
I
dog
hated
collar?
it, and then eventually, like, the first time someone said to me, "We're doing this thing I'd like you to wear," when I was like, "Not on your life."
What does it mean? What's the symbolism?
Well, and as I grew more, it actually is a symbol of slavery. So interesting that the Christian clergy early in the Christian church, one of the symbols, they chose symbols that were actually more connected to slaves.
Oh.
So that's why the monks often had what's called tonsure. They cut half their hair off
Yeah.
because that's the way slaves were treated, and that's how slaves were marked socially. And so the white collar and other forms of collar was someone who's given up his rights willingly to be a slave, a servant, um, and so eventually I was like, wow, if that's what that means, I connected with the imagery, and even though I do understand that imagery might be confusing, and I remember, yeah, it's a lot, eh?
No, it's yeah, it's a lot. But what happened?
So then every time I put that collar on, I'd tell myself, I want to just be a servant to the people here. And even bishops tend to wear purple ones, but purple is in the liturgical kind of scheme of things, it's the color of penitence. And so I felt like I want to be the penitence man. I won't be the most holy or righteous or get everything together man, but I would like to be the most penitent.
As with Indiana Jones.
Yeah, it does, eh? Yeah, it does.
Only
Saved
the
his life.
man may pass.
Yeah, that's true.
So that journey, I remember because I went hunting with some folks. Did you create the Via Church or something?
Yeah.
Was that part of that? That was part of that kind of Frankenstein thing.
Yeah.
And so what happened that you're not like where you're at right now? Like now we've come to now. I mean, I don't want you to uncover what you don't want to, but
I'll try to, as much as we can.
Be honest.
Yeah, I would be. Trying to think there was a couple that left our church and didn't make any formal complaint, but I'd heard that they were unhappy and felt like I hadn't served them well, but didn't know what I'd done. Now, even that's part of a problem. I mean, there's I wish I should have known, but I didn't. And they weren't really, as I said, making any formal complaint. But I talked to my kind of second in charge and thought, I think we need to figure out what we did here. And he was like, I think we can figure it out internally. I said, I don't think we can. I think I got to bring someone in from the outside. I think we're all too close to it. So I did. I brought in someone from the outside to have my own self investigated. I just needed someone from the outside to listen. And so he did a very thorough investigation.
So like a Christian investigator. Wow. That's a thing, hey?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, someone to
kind of like piecing together a murder, but
yeah. And so he did. I think was good in terms of really help these people to be listened to. And I hope taken seriously. We're not, brushing anything under any carpets. And he did a good process, and anybody in our leadership or church that wanted to speak to this could speak to it. And I thought he led a good process. This is hard. First day in it, I actually started to have heart attack symptoms. It was very tough. But I believed in it. It was my idea. And so when he'd finished the process, kind of did his executive summary, and the couple signed off on it. I signed off on it. He's like, Todd didn't have an affair, or there wasn't anything like romantic inclination, but he committed, we called it emotional codependency. And I signed off on it. I mean, I think he's right.
So explain that, like the emotional codependencies.
I got in way too deep into people's lives. I thought I was doing a great job pastoring because I never pastored before. I'd been a kind of itinerant speaker, but I never really pastored, and I'd never been responsible to help build a community. And so I think I made tons of mistakes. I think well-intentioned mistakes, but well-intentioned mistakes are just still mistakes. got in way too deep, and that ended up affecting people. And I still carry just such deep remorse. So I wrote to that, a 5 pages typed letter to that couple of, poured my heart. I could feel deep sorrow. When you hurt people you love, of course I don't have a malicious bone in my body. Like, I would never try to hurt somebody. But I have other bones in my body that get me in trouble, like my idealism. When I follow an ideal, sometimes I just fix so much on the ideal that sometimes the real I could miss.
Right.
I think my heroism is that to want to be people's hero blinded me to things. I think the need for external validation. I think when people are like, "You're the best pastor, you're just doing a great job," I'm like, I think I missed things. So I thought I'm doing a great job. So I think, so I carry a lot. I love those people and hurt them, and have tried to do everything I could do to make that right. So that's part of the story. I took a year off after.
Really?
Yeah. To, sought help, meaning, because once someone shows it to you, it was clear to me, but how did I miss that?
You see the throughout your history kind of thing?
Yeah. And also, but I mean, like, why didn't I see it sooner? Why was I blind to it? Why did I think I was doing such a great and noble job? And so I really gave myself some time to receive help and counseling, and that was good. That was good. But I think, and then the story goes on. I think that people feel like I should have been punished more.
So you had a pretty big church happening, right? And there was saddle, and so this created ripples.
Yeah.
And then more people kind of pitted against you from just that couple. Is that what happened?
Yeah, it looked like it was kind of done.
Just jumped on the bandwagon.
Yeah, it looked like it was finished. I thought that it was a tough story, but one that had a good ending. Like, we didn't brush stuff under a rug. There was an acknowledgement of hurt. Yeah. And I think, and there were real changes in the organization and in me to, like, we gotta make sure we don't do that again. And I don't believe I'm not really sure when we joined a larger Anglican group.
Okay. So you came back, and then water was
I came back after what's that?
Water was under the bridge at that point?
You know what? I think I thought it was. I can see now, looking back, I think my own people, like, I don't think they forgave me. I think I should have let it go. I think I apologized so many times and tried to show how people can move and learn and grow. But I think these were young leaders I brought in, and I think, too many stars in their eyes regarding me. So I think there are all people with not easy stories. There are people that, let's just say, I showed a lot of grace to over some pretty serious stuff. And I think that the thought that they might extend that back wasn't a natural place. That I think trust had been, they saw me blow it, and trust had been injured. And I wished I'd known earlier, just let it go.
Let it go. You say just not go back.
Yeah. Sometimes you just got to realize once trust is hurt.
That seems so contradictory to the whole, what we're taught in the church, right? To forgive. The story of the robber, a lot of these things, I've been so far out of the church for so long, I'm actually starting to reconnect with some of these Bible stories, like the Good Samaritan. It's just a really good story.
Fantastic.
I kind of like the way Jordan Peterson, I don't want to get off on another tangent, but the way he says, as the story goes, and that to me lets some weight off. This is like, when it's the word of God, it's too much,
Yeah.
But these stories of just like forgiveness and to want to, it's just so backwards.
Yeah. And if someone needs to frame them up as ancient Jewish life lessons or stories, same thing. I love those stories.
Like the prostitute. That was a big deal. Because in their law, she was supposed to be stoned to death, and he stood in between them. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
She, extreme forgiveness.
And that's my longing. I think all along is, I really tried to listen well, go along with the process well, repent well, like all in the hope that that would be extended to me. No, it hasn't been.
So you're absorbed by a bigger organization.
Yeah, and I think so.
And then
Then people
things
were upset with
escalated?
me. I think it was leveraged. I think that in some ways now Todd is part of this big organization. I don't think, maybe I'm not totally sure because people have not really talked to me, but I think the sense maybe he wasn't punished enough. And how much do you get punished for codependency? I think I'm not, yeah.
Crucify,
I
crucify.
and they really did I mean, I feel like I've been kind of endured a kind of a public global shaming.
Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Like from the pulpit?
Oh, every form these days in social media, the way I've been portrayed. It's not just Todd's made, there's a narrative been put out, and you're being put in the pillory box, the medieval pillory box, and left hung out to dry. And yeah, the narrative isn't, this is a good guy. He tried to get it right and he really blew it, but it's kind of the narrative is like, this was a really bad guy. And the truth is, I wasn't involved in hidden things. I wasn't like, it's okay, I think, but
It's okay.
well, I
It doesn't
mean,
look
what am
very
I?
okay. It doesn't sound very okay.
Well, you hardly know what to do with your own emotions because you're like, well, afterwards I did blow it, and afterwards I did get too connected and too involved, and I did hurt people. So you're not really sure what to do, whether you have the right to say that hurts, or whether you have the right to say, don't I still have some value?
I mean, when the seething rabble comes after you, you're probably best just to walk away because they want to devour you.
And that's what I've done. So that's why this is the first time I've never spoke about it publicly.
Well, thank you for doing that.
I've never defended myself. There's all kinds of things I could publish that would make people go, "Oh, that's a side of a story we've never been told." I could, like in people's, I could, if I published the things they wrote me, I would go, "Oh my goodness, why is that side of a story never been told?" But I'm not going to do that.
I mean, yeah. How does it help the situation, right? I mean,
that's the thing.
It almost makes you look more guilty.
It could do it, but it also would hurt people. I don't know how to look more guilty than I already am, but whatever you do, it will be a weapon to hit.
There seems to be this hunger in humans, and I've heard this from other very famous people that that once you've reached a level, humans want, if there's a chink in the armor that they can bring you down and crucify you, they will go for it. And when they smell that blood, it's like sharks. Like, we want to, when a person in leadership shows their weakness or shows a chink, there's something in humans, not just in the church, but they want to see the great man fall because it makes you feel better about yourself. It's like that's just something that's in us as humans. I think we're jealous. We're riddled with jealousy and comparison, and it's that they get this guilty pleasure out of watching a great celebrity get caught in the act of something or whatever it might be, and that ruins their career. We revel in it, and it's sad. I mean, it's very animalistic, right? It makes me. We are like gorillas sometimes. I mean, I don't really believe in evolution, but man, we do act like animals sometimes. It's like, hey, there's the wounded animal. Let's just go devour it and pummel it.
And that's another one of these things that at least brings me back to like Jesus. Like Peter didn't blow it in a little way. Like he actually committed a grievous bodily harm to somebody, cut a guy's. It was just the way that Jesus still treated him like a human being and didn't hang him out to dry forever to public shaming. He leveraged his mistakes to make him a better man.
So Todd, how do you this experience, and it's not over yet for you, right? You're in the same spot as me almost. It's we're put in this position to build this empire, a church empire, and then criticized when you might feel like a little bit chuffed because you're good at what you do. And that to me is when I went back into the world, I could go and play at a nightclub And no one came up to me and said, you're glorifying yourself. You're bringing attention to yourself, which is what happened in church.
Yeah.
If you were getting up there and you started to, God forbid, like enjoy yourself, you were pushed down. It's like, and it's just so bloody confusing to try and dance that dance. It's like, you got to lead, and we're humans, and I like, what's the point? What's the point of church? I asked myself, well, what's the point? Like, it just seems so messy, and it just constantly starts great, turns into a mess. Starts great, turns into a mess, because humanity gets in there. So why not just not start it anymore? You know, I mean, this is church. We always say that, right? Just hanging out, just community. Because what you did, I don't know exactly what you did, but in the corporate world would not be a problem, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we're expected to be like Christ, like holy, like that's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been watching some of the examples from Hollywood. Came across a video of Mel Gibson giving acceptance, or it's not Mel Gibson. Robert Downey Jr. giving an acceptance speech at something and he talks about how he hit an all-time low on, I think, his cocaine addiction. And Mel Gibson came to him and just spoke to him, and you need God by some description, and just like, and the best part of his career has been afterwards. If someone hadn't saw that guy still had some value, that he's not more than just the sum total of his mistakes. And in this case, it was someone that believed in God, came to him, and I think he called it, you have to hug the cactus, meaning it's going to be, and so that's what I've tried to do, hug the cactus, meaning I'm not trying to steer away from my mistakes. I'm not trying to portray them in any other way. I mean, not everything I was accused of did I actually do as mistakes, but I've really, really tried to hug the cactus and feel the pain, and not justifying myself. But you know, if that could happen in Hollywood, I'm kind of shocked that it doesn't happen in the church. Isn't that the stuff we should be really good at? Yeah. But restoring people, at least, I might still be just idealistic.
It happens all the time, right? And it's picking and choosing what you hear from God, or what scripture you take and take it out of context. Or I think there's so much humanity in the church, and people try to pretend it's not there. Craving drama. And I remember that. I mean, something dramatic happens, and then you just like, it just starts to, happens in the world, happens in the church. You know, I remember when the Canadians lost the Stanley Cup in Vancouver, and there was riots in downtown Vancouver. I don't know if you remember that. They were setting light to police cars.
Yeah.
And people were like, I don't know what happened to me. I just started throwing stuff. That's not me. And this rabble energy.
Yeah. The rabble.
I mean, when Jesus was getting crucified, his own people turned their backs on him. It was like a fear of,
that deep judgmentalism. There is a herd instinct to it when we see it happening.
Big time.
Because I've hardly had a single person come to me and say, Todd, this is stuff that can I hear it from you?
Can't believe that.
I've lost almost every friend in my life, and hardly a single person has come and said, hey, I know, or this doesn't sound like the Todd I know. Anyways, what I hope people would hear in me is, did I make some mistakes. I've done every effort I know how to do to turn my face into that wind and see it, because I don't want to hurt people. I set out on this whole journey to help people. But there's got to be another side. You know, I told a few people, I guess my therapist, however deep you cut me, at my very core, there is a belief in redemption. You know, movies that have redemption stories, I am a sucker for them.
We all are.
Yeah, because it is deep in our fabric.
This is what I don't know, like what we've just been through as a world with COVID. Hate to bring it up, but rabble mentality, division, and I lost my train of thought. I completely lost my train of thought. What did you just say before?
Well, you seem to be that deep in our fabric is that I said I love movies that have a redemption story.
Right. And so I kept bringing this up. Like, I was very outspoken during that whole process. I didn't like the way the main narrative was going, and I lost even more friends. I lost a lot of friends and fractured. And I said on social media, and I got on there not because I just felt compelled because our voice is being squelched.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't care if anyone watches. This is a rebellion that I have in me. I am going to speak just because I'm not going to be the one that hides myself under a rock and pretends what's going on isn't going on. And I was like, you watch Braveheart and scream your head off when Braveheart stands up and says freedom against the establishment, right?
Yeah.
Everyone stands up and loves the hero, but what happened was the complete inverse of that. People would stand up and go to Ottawa and say, we don't believe in this.
Yeah.
And people were like, sit back down. Like, all we want you to do is kiss. You know, when you see Robin Hood, it's like, and all his helpers say, just kneel down and kiss the ring, and in your heart, you don't have to believe it. Just do it, because it's going to, Braveheart did that, right? He's like, you're going to die. You're gonna and he's like, no, on principle. And I feel like there's just been a complete loss of principle living. Like, on principle, this is just plain wrong. I don't care what the cost is.
Yeah, I agree.
And I've lost all of my friends before being ousted from the church. I know how that feels, Todd. Yeah. And I probably didn't deal with it in a mature way like you are. I didn't go and get counseling. I just ran and ran until there was no gas left in the tank. And then I was just a numb mess, right? And part of my restoration was coming to Campbell River.
Right.
It's kind of crazy, because I came to Campbell River literally believing that God had turned his back on me because I had done the cardinal sin, which is divorce.
Yeah.
And I remember camping there, and I'll never forget this feeling. I was like, God will, like, and I stood at the back. I wanted to be completely invisible, expecting at any moment someone's going to point me out. You at the back there. Like, I wasn't joking. I was for sure feeling like, but I had to see, I was just seeing because I still blurred the lines between church and God. And I was like, I need to know if I'm okay still. I feel it, but I want to really make sure. And that was part of my journey back in. And then Jamie invited me to Kamloops, and then it all started again. And then kind of went through it again. I got out twice, but I have a hard time squaring, like we started this conversation off, squaring the damage. Like, if you were given an opportunity, would you go build another church?
But maybe for different reasons than you? Like, I'm not actually sure. Like, again, that's a great question. I can't tell. Like, part of me feels I've been thrown. My confidence has been thrown. So that's part of it. Like, it's not because I don't think that church, because I don't fundamentally believe in it anymore. I feel more like I love the church, and I love Christ's bride, but that bride does not love me. I definitely have some hurt there with church. But would I go start it? No, but it's not because I'm not sure why I wouldn't. Partially because I don't think I've probably lost confidence that I could do anything, or let's say that I could be any kind of I would probably run from, I run from leadership. So you can hear in my mixture of thoughts that I don't have a lot of clarity on that. The answer is no, I wouldn't go straight, but it might be different reasons than your wouldn't, and that's okay.
Do you think if Jesus came back to earth right now, what do you think he would think about, not what happened to you, but what we've created? And I'm talking about the institution, the church. What do you think he would do?
So let me give you it's a slightly different answer, but what maybe the part B of that, what do you think he'd do? I think what he would do is the same thing he did the first time. He'd go to the margins. He'd go to the people that are most despised and most rejected. I think his characters remain the same, so I think he'd do exactly what he did last time, and I think he would annoy the center.
Could be the same.
I think he would annoy the center.
Yeah.
Because the more impetus he gained, notoriety amongst the despised and the rejected, the more it angered the respected. And so he was moving in mercy, and they were moving in power. Not, I don't mean divine power or healing power. I mean, they're just afraid of losing power. And
narcissistic church.
it was. And so I think history would play itself again.
Yeah. The sequel would be the same as the first. It would be like all bummed out. Same thing.
Yeah.
So if we know that, why do we keep, like, if your dad's coming to visit, why do we continue to build a house that he's not going to like?
Yeah.
If you know that when he comes, he's going to be pissed.
That's a good one.
So what is the friggin' point? Like, what are we doing?
And I don't personally know how to build a better one. The thing about the years I served as pastor, I did the very best I knew how. I really threw myself into that, and I really fell short. I don't know how to do a better job than I did. So that's why I can't do it again.
So
I tried
like
to
we're trying to restore an old rusty car that just is like, guys, like, let's rethink this whole thing. Like, it's full of rot.
Yeah.
I don't deny the fact that people feel family in church. They feel community, for sure. Why? I think it calls out to a people in a certain walk of life where they're just needing. I don't know how to explain it all, but it just, yeah. When I walk into church or when I'm around it, it just feels like they're in arrested development. Like it's just.
Yeah.
It's just,
the other thing is I can't also tell where it's my pain speaking, meaning when I was a brand new Christian and we went to church here in Lethbridge, it wasn't like, it's just like a united church. It wasn't, but when I'd come out of a family riddled with alcoholism, like when adults used together, it was alcohol, and meaning it wasn't a charismatic church. They weren't singing modern songs, but there was something special there for me. And it wasn't in the service. I couldn't stay awake. I couldn't understand it, but it was sometimes, there wasn't a lot of youth. So the men would kind of come along and tease you a little bit and pat you on the back. And it was the first time I saw healthy male interactions,
right,
that were not drunk and demeaning. And then we moved to Saskatchewan, and that church, I remember looking at all the youth, and anyways, it served me well. It was what I needed at that time of life. And so that's the thing is those were not perfect churches, but they were what I needed. So that's why it's hard to answer the question, is because I don't know how to speak outside of my pain or from my pain. Whereas there were times in life, it was really good for me.
But what you said there is that it was the community that you latched onto. And it's like we all, whether you're in religion or out of religion, crave community. We're built to be in tribe. And I feel like so we've already said if Jesus comes back, it will be a sequel. It will be the same. And he will walk away from this thing. So it's like, I just built this awesome house and he doesn't even want to spend a night in here. Awesome. And and
it may not be like that. Maybe I said it too matter of factly.
No, I
somehow
I completely
know.
agree with you, Todd. And I think there's still, I can sense it in you. There's still a lot of loyalty around everything that you believe. And that for me took years to tease apart.
Yeah.
I had to get angry at it. I had to hate it. Then now I'm starting to like be able to tell my son about Samson and just tell it like a really good adventure story.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
10 years to be able to even speak about it because it was so tangled up in guilt and goodness knows what. I was recently involved in, I don't know if they have it out where you are, but so when I moved from Vancouver to Vancouver Island 2.5 years ago, and we bought a 5-acre farm.
Yeah.
And goats and, and I met this guy and he said, I want you to come. Would you want to come to men's group tonight? And I was like, well, what's that all about? So I showed up there, and it was in a farm around a campfire because it was in the summer. There was about 30 men there. And it was a new men's night. So once a month is new men's night. So we stood around at the outskirts of the farm, and I was triggered big time. And this is like, 15 years after Kamloops?
Yeah.
And I was like, this is organized. Anytime when there's some kind of hierarchy and all that, I'm just like, trigger. And we walked down the farm lane, and this man met us there, and he puts his hand on my heart, and he says, are you the man you want to be?
Yeah.
And he goes, and you didn't ask for an answer, just said, okay, you come into the circle, And it's called the Mankind Project, and it's all over the world, I now
Oh,
realize. And so there's probably one in Lethbridge, and they
yeah.
meet every week. It's kind of like going to an AA meeting, but it's based on just owning your crap, fully owning it,
Yeah.
and realizing that it's not so-and-so's problem, it's your problem. It's just, and being the best man you can be, and it's only men. And so it really triggered me, and I kept going and kept going. And then they said, do you want to go to warrior camp?
Yeah.
And it's incredible. So I'm like, oh, sure, I'll sign up for warrior camp. So when you go to warrior camp, it's a 3-day thing. And when you come back from there, you're kind of like initiated into the group. And so I go to this warrior camp, and it's in the middle of the bush. It has to be in the middle of nowhere because it's very loud. And basically the whole weekend is set up to trigger you. So when you pull up down the road, you wind the window down and say, I'm here for warrior camp. He talks to you like you're coming, like the guy said to me, he's like, you're 2 minutes early, go back up the road and stop and wait. Like, whoa, what's going on here? So immediately I started to get triggered about this like power
Yeah.
hungry
Yeah.
guy, right? I didn't know what was going on. I mean, we were all up at the top of this forest road, and everyone's like, what's wrong with him, man? He was so wound up. And then we drive down at the right time, and he just nods us on. And then you get strip searched. They take everything off your body, like a wedding ring, like anything like that, take it away. You're stripped of your name. They give you a number.
Wow.
And when you walk into the room, it's got like these spotlights, and no one is smiling at you. Everyone is super stern, and it's like you're going into a prisoner of war camp. And so for me, I thought, oh, this is kind of funny. I kind of saw the theatrics of it, but for other people, some people just packed their bags and left.
Yeah. They thought, I don't have time for this.
So what triggered him didn't trigger me. But then later on in the night, they started playing these tricks on you, and they didn't feed you either. And they woke you up at like 4 a.m. I think the only thing we ate was peanuts. And then you had to cold plunge in the morning. And it was incredibly transformative. Like,
really?
Absolutely one of the highlights of my life. Like,
really?
I came away from there, and I came home, and I sat around with my family around the table. I was just crying. I was like, I'm sorry, I haven't been. Makes me all like hairs on my head. I mean, there's so much detail about that weekend.
Yeah.
There was a sexuality session.
Yeah.
And we came in, and I went to the bathroom, came out, everyone had their clothes off. And there was 200 men there. No, maybe
Really?
about 100. And one of the guys I came with, that was his breaking point. He got in his truck, drove home. And it meant he had to catch a ferry. I mean, it was in the middle of nowhere. And the humility. And what ministered to me, that's a very Christianese word, but what really healed me more than all of the events was, for the first time in my life, I saw humble leadership, like modeled to me, like strong, gifted leaders. I mean, like really strong, because these are men, like, stand up strong, be a man in your own right. Like, I was really motivated there, like, go chop firewood, that kind of thing. Like, be the best man for your wife and your kids. And then I saw these guys get off the quote unquote stage and then sit next to you naked and say, I struggled with pornography last night. The same man that was up there leading the session before.
Yeah, right.
And no one else really understood that takeaway from me, because I don't think anyone had come out of the background that I come out of.
Yeah, right.
And still to this day, when I go every Tuesday, there's men's group I can go, or I don't have to go. You just drop in. I'm still blown away by the humility of this leadership, and they're not that. One of the tenets of it is like, no one can fix you in this room. You can fix yourself.
Yeah.
So it's not a counseling group, but you can be completely raw and open, and we will accept you exactly the way you are. So you could say, I mean, some of the stuff that's shared in there is so raw and and you're like, and you say your piece, and no one tries to butt in and say, oh, have you tried this? It goes to the next guy. And it's all about taking ownership of your stuff, but just the acceptance and humble leadership and all of that. It was just like, and that to me is so like that. That is, if Jesus came back, I think he would chill there. Yeah. I think he would be totally cool with walking into that room and sitting for the whole session.
Yeah.
And I wonder.
Oh, thank you for telling me that.
What's the difference?
I don't know.
And I think it's man trying to steer man.
But that's a powerful experience, and I know mine's a little more fresh than yours.
Yeah.
I as you said, I still love the church. She doesn't love me. So I go and kind of sit on the back row.
Wow, you still go to church?
I didn't. Yeah, I do.
You're a glutton for
Um,
punishment, Todd.
yeah, and I'm not defending that. I'm just saying I do. I probably have low expectations in terms of is anybody going? But I wouldn't go start one. As I said, I think I just threw everything I had into it and came up short and don't know how to. I mean, I've obviously grown as a person and wouldn't repeat my mistakes. But there was another side of the story, which is it wasn't all mistakes. And when we ignore the rest of the story, when we recount things, anyways, yeah. So
Todd,
I guess,
I haven't known you for a long. I've known you deep. I've known you for a lot of years, but we haven't been around each other. And all I
yeah,
can say is when I hear you talk like that, just don't listen to that bullshit.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
we weren't close friends, but I saw the way you led, the way you preached, the way you did. I saw a humble man, and I saw the man doing a very good job, not in a trying to uplift you, but you affected a lot of people in a very positive way. I mean, I
well,
remember
thank you.
talking to you when we were on that boat trip, and I was like, Todd, you were like a father figure, and I wish you'd stood up and protected me.
Yes, I am.
And so I wouldn't
I
have
would.
seen that in you unless I'd seen that in you,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
think you've
yeah,
been that throughout your life, way beyond what I've known. You've touched far more people than you've hurt.
yeah. I mean, well, I'm going to tell you a little story because it represents something. When I started ministry young, 18, and I had this kind of English mentor. His name was Dr. Tony Stone, and he was an outstanding speaker, but he was fairly strict kind of guy and high standards. But one day the little team of people that he was training wanted to go into a nearby town, and after we'd done our work, and they were all from England, and there wasn't a lot of McDonald's at that time in England. And so they really wanted to go for a milkshake or something. So I'm the only guy with a Canadian license. I'll drive them. And long story, we got acting up, and I did some dumb things driving, which is kind of an interesting story. Almost killed somebody.
Nigel Mansell.
Yeah, I know. You can see why I was saying that because of my own story. Is these guys were acting up, jumping front and back and limbs out windows, and we came along a slow moving car.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like chanting, "Pass him, pass him, pass him." And so I'm responsible. I was driving, but I did try to pass him, but we're coming up a hill, and this car that it was the pastor had lent us. There wasn't really enough power to pass going up this hill. And then there came another car over the crest of the hill. Of course, I should have very quickly braked and went back, but instead, I think I'm James Bond. In the excitement of the moment, I swing over into the kind of half into the ditch, slide. The car goes between us. I get back in, successfully pass, and then one of the people in the car says, "That car that you almost hit head on, turn around and chase us." Anyways, I thought
Oh,
you're not going to catch me.
in the
So
pastor's car.
in the pastor's car. So we get
With a
to
bumper sticker says
McDonald's.
Jesus saves.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it didn't, but it should have. Anyways, it was just super dumb thing, but I forgot all about it. We get back to the place where we're staying, and a little while later, the pastor comes to my door where I'm staying, and he's a mountain of a man. And I said to him, "Oh, hey, pastor, nice to see you." And he says, "I wish I could say the same for you, Todd." And then he says, "You know that car that you almost hit head on? How does he know?" He goes, "That was my wife."
Good boy.
So, I mean, I'm 18, so she comes over the crest of the hill, sees her own car coming at her.
Yeah.
So she pulled over the side of the road, not because she was chasing, but because she feared she was on the verge of a heart attack. So, a colossal blunder. I mean, dumb 18-year-old thing. So I think this is my first week of ministry. I'm going to get kicked out.
Yeah.
And probably should be, but it's what I'm anticipating. And I've never been like a discipline problem in my life. And here, my first couple of weeks of ministry, I blow it that severely.
Yeah.
And so I hear Dr. Tony Stone, my mentor. I can hear him come up the stairs, and I hear him talking to a few people. And I just thought, I'll just face the music. I meet him, and I said, "Dr. Stone, I'm so sorry. I've always been a good driver and pretty safe driver, I think. I never And as I'm so sorry, I don't know what got. And I meant it everywhere. I was really sorrowful. And anyways, he says, "Well, there's no need to beat you up. Clearly, you've beaten yourself up." And he says, and then he's besides, and he kind of looked both ways. He goes, "You haven't seen my drive." But I'll tell you what, a moment of grace changed my life, because that's not when I grew up. My family became Christians, but before they were, you don't get grace like that. Whatever mistake you made, your nose will be rubbed in it again and again. And no matter how many times you say sorry, it's never done. And that moment where I really, behaved like an adolescent, didn't hurt anybody, could have hurt somebody. But that moment where he's like, "I don't need to, you clearly learned. I don't need to like reprimand you. You know."
Yeah.
And it was kind of a humble, and you haven't seen my driving. He wasn't a great driver, I found out.
Mm-hmm.
The way it made me feel made me want to spend the whole rest of my life paying that on forward to others.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was part of a church that could do that to people and give them those moments in Jesus' name, and if I received any gift right now, I think probably it'd be something like that. But I think I'm meant to receive it right now just from God alone, because I think that's probably where I'm at right now is, could I receive that from God when I'm not receiving it from people?
Mm-hmm.
And could that be enough for me?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably defines where I'm at.
Beautiful. And so what are you doing now? Now you're not running a church.
Yeah, well, I'm virtually unemployable. Because of the stuff that's been put on the internet, it's made me almost unemployable.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So my daughter is a professional. That's what she does. She works for the government in human resources. She hires people. And she says, "Papa, no one's going to hire you." For the first thing she says, I Google people. And so I can't, I've been legally defamed, and I can't really do anything. So I'm having to look for other things. So fortunately, there are people that seek me out. A number of years ago, in about 2016, 17, this old Roman Catholic man that I met from Loyola University, he was acted as my spiritual director. I didn't even know what that was, but he's helped me a ton, and he's the one who's trekked with me through thick and thin and said, "Todd, I know you're on the margins now, but but that's where God's Spirit works the strongest." Anyways, he is served, but so then he trained me as what's called a spiritual director. So I get to do for other people the way he's helped me. So it's kind of, you imagine a therapist, but for the spiritual life. It's not quite, it's different than therapy, but I'm trying to find
the
something.
spiritually abused or the...
Yeah, it could be anybody. If someone said, "I want to find God, but I've been deeply hurt, and I would like to have a very real relationship with God, whether I'm in the church or out of the church.
Wow.
And I need it to be real, and I need it to be personal. How would I gain that?"
That's crazy. So they pay you to tell them.
They pay me. Yeah, it's less talking, meaning it's a spiritual director is not so much a teacher, but I do it, and I love it, and watching my what's called my clients or directees having these incredibly, like, I got one guy, his name is David, and you would never know, he's from the States, but his name means the beloved, and he said, "I never in my life felt beloved of God. I finally realized, why I'm called that." And to hear him say that, and he's a successful entrepreneur who's like, for the first time in my life, I feel beloved of God, and I meet with him once a week, and that kind of thing is replicated. So that's what I mean. Somehow through my pain, I told you I'm a sucker for a redemption story. So that is one of the ways in which redemption is unfolding in my life.
Mm.
So I do. So in some ways I meet with them regularly, and weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, and then I do have a local pastor here who's a bishop, and he calls me his researcher, but I kind of set up his, do a lot of the background stuff for his teaching, present him with notes than to work with. He's a professional therapist, so he doesn't have a lot of time, and I don't tell him what to say. Of course, he's a very accomplished, but I do a lot of the background work for him. So those are the So I'm trying to feel the way forward into the future.
And Sherry's a designer, right?
No, she was an administrator for a designer. Her
Right.
best friend was a designer.
Right.
Had their own business, and she was, helped with planning, finances, bookwork, and stuff.
Yeah, because I saw her on I think she followed my company on Instagram.
That's true. That's the last time you met. She was still doing that. No, and then she's moved on a couple times for jobs. She works also for the provincial government in child and family services. She's an administrator.
And you got
So
hobbies?
Pardon?
What's your hobbies?
I like exercising. Weirdly enough, I like working out.
Nice. I do.
And it's one of the few places I have a community.
At the gym, yeah.
Yeah, because I've known people for a lot of years, and for some reason they really like me. And it's a place where, I don't know, I get to, I notice when someone's hurting, and you don't go about that like you would do it in a church, but I have my own way of, okay, today. And then I'm fine. And then that guy came back to me, one of the biggest guys in there. He's like, you asked me that question a few days ago, and I got thinking, I don't think I am fine, actually.
Yeah.
How did you know
beneath
that?
the surface?
And so that's happened. That's replicated a lot of times. I met a guy there not too long ago, and only met him once. And he came back and said, I'm getting married. Would you do pre-marriage counseling for me? Would you help us out? Okay, I just need to talk to someone. I'm estranged from my family, and I don't know what I'm feeling. Is it good or right? Could I just, sure. Another guy that I know is, a younger guy and wants to, where do you even start looking for a vocation? And I don't even know what I would do. I'm just graduating from high school, and I was a basketball coach up, for a number of years. And so an old player comes around and just needs a little help. So that just, I like doing this. So that's a hobby. I like outdoors. Like I really like being in the mountains. I like hiking. I'm at an age now where I've got a little bit of arthritis in one knee, so it's making that a little difficult. But
I've my body is. I've had a lot of serious accidents. So
yes, I know you have. You're very accident prone.
I have. Well, really? Back then you knew that?
I knew some of it, and then I was looking on. You sent me the web link to your podcast here.
Okay.
And then in perusing it, I realized you had a lot more serious accidents than I had been aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I literally just a month ago broke my back.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a lot more than.
I'm not in a wheelchair, thank God. But yeah. So it's been five accidents that have taken me to the ER in 2.5 years.
My goodness, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah. Serious. But this time they recognize me. They're like, I
you
remember
again?
you. And I'm like, okay, that's not a good sign.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And it's not a hobby, but I love being a dad. So still every day part of the redemption is losing my job has given me a lot of time even more time to invest into my family. So more every day, anything I can do for one of my kids. And now I've got a grandchild, a wonderful granddaughter who's
great. 7,
who I adore.
Yeah.
And I pick her up at our playtimes. And so it's not a hobby, I guess, but it's probably one of the most meaningful things in my life is I just love being a dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have 4 children now, so got married a third time 15 years ago, I think. And
yeah, we met your wife when we were with you on your boat.
Oh, okay, Tara, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always say to people, I'm a much better dad the second time around.
Yeah.
Just all of the angst and trying to make my way in life, just as, I just realize how fast it goes. And I'm, we fish a lot, mountain bike a lot, do a lot of it.
We're going to be, when we visited you last time, did you live in Vancouver or Vancouver Island?
Vancouver.
I thought so. Well, we are going to be in Vancouver in 3 weeks, Vancouver Island. We have family in Victoria.
Okay. Yeah. So we're at the Comox Valley. So it's about 3 hours from Victoria.
I used to have a church in the Comox Valley. So yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So anyways, maybe we'll get a chance to see you. We still have incredibly warm memories of the last visit with you.
Yeah. Well, if you're ever up our way, we've got a big farm, lots of room. And,
Joby, I will come. I will come and see you.
That'd be great.
And thank you for doing this. I've never been on a podcast. before. Thank you for inviting me to do this. So I know I'm pretty a little raw still. I hope that
No, I mean,
adds to and doesn't detract from.
No, you've been very open and unguarded, and I appreciate that. I was nervous. I've had a lot of conversations, and I was a bit nervous because my memories of Todd are Todd the strong leader, right? And I just as soon as the camera rolls, right, all that comes away, and you just it's
Well, if it helps, I was a little nervous too. So
yeah.
it was a kind of a vulnerable place for me, So
Yeah.
thanks for making that easy.
Yeah. Well, I honor you, Todd, and all the best.
Yeah, I'll look you up on Vancouver Island.
Yeah. Say hi to Sherry.
Okay, likewise, and please say hi to Tara if
All right.
she might remember us.
Okay. Love you, Todd.
Okay, love you too, buddy. Thanks for the gift of this. Bye-bye for now.
All right. Talk soon. Bye.